In this video, we will be bleeding the brakes and discussing flushing the braking system in this 2019 Jeep Compass. Through the driver's side door, we want to pop the hood, and after releasing our secondary safety latch, we can gain access to the engine bay. Taking a look inside the engine bay, we will be locating our brake fluid reservoir. On the top of our cap, it does say .3 brake fluid, just to help us verify we are in the correct location. And we'll have to refer back here as we progress. To begin this service, we will be starting at the passenger side rear tire. This is the location furthest from the brake fluid reservoir. And to prep this, I am using wheel chocks, a jack to raise the vehicle just until the wheel is off the ground, and I have safety stands on this side of the vehicle. And with a 19mm socket, we can remove our wheel. Taking a look at our braking assembly, we have our rotor. Around our rotor, we have our caliper and caliper mounting bracket. We will be focusing on the caliper. Taking a closer look at that caliper, we can see our brake bleed screw. This is where we will be focusing the majority of our attention. That brake bleed screw does have a rubber dust boot that we can remove. And then we want to use the shank of a drill bit that is the same size as the hole in our bleed screw. This is a 1/8 inch drill bit, and that fits in there nice and snug. And then we can put a drip pan underneath that, and then using an 11mm combination wrench with the box end or the closed end over that bleed screw, we want to very gently work that loose. This is righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. The purpose of the drill bit is to prevent the bleed screw from collapsing if we apply too much force or if this is rusted in place. And when that becomes loose, a little bit of brake fluid should flow from that bleed screw. And we'll snug that back down. Now, to reduce the chance of a mess, I am going to install vinyl tubing. And then I have that tubing run into a collection container. And I have that tubing fed all the way into the corner of that container at the bottom. This will help us down the road. So at this point, we are going to have one person in the vehicle, and they're going to be controlling the brake pedal. The other person is going to be at the bleed screw, and they're going to be opening and closing the bleed screw. The person in the driver's seat is going to press the brake pedal down 2 times. They are then going to begin pressing it a 3rd time and say, open. The person at the bleed screw is going to open the bleed screw, and then the person in the driver's seat in charge of the brake pedal is going to say, close, just before that brake pedal reaches the bottom. When that person says close, the person at the bleed screw needs to close the bleed screw. What you don't want to have happen is releasing the brake pedal while the bleed screw is open, or you will be pulling air into the system. Or in this case, since we have submerged the vinyl tubing, we will pull dirty brake fluid back into the system. Open, close, open, close, open, close. Every so often we want to check and top off the brake fluid reservoir. We do not want this reservoir to run empty, or it will just be pulling air into the system. So we've done this a couple times now, and we're going to top it off with Amsoil .3 and 4 brake fluid. And you will want to recap that brake fluid reservoir. If you are only bleeding the brakes, You probably only need to do this about a dozen times, because bleeding the brakes, we are just cleaning out a little bit of the brake fluid right near each braking assembly. If you are flushing the entire system for this first side, I would recommend pushing through about 18 ounces of fluid. If you don't have a second person for this procedure, you can do this by yourself with a brake bleed tool. This tool has a rubber end on it and hooks up to an air compressor to create a vacuum. And with that bleed procedure or flush procedure completed, we can make sure that bleed screw is tight and replace that dust boot. The passenger side rear is now completed. We want to put everything back together and move all of our equipment to the driver side rear. This is the next furthest one from the brake fluid reservoir. And this process is done exactly the same, with the exception that we don't need to run through as much brake fluid. For the second side, I will typically run through about 9 ounces of brake fluid. Our next location is the passenger side front. The only differences are I'm going to move my wheel chocks to the rear, and I'm only going to pump through about 6 ounces of brake fluid. And our driver side front then will be the last location that we do. The procedure is the same, and I am only going to pump through about 6 ounces of brake fluid. This then will conclude each of the 4 brake locations. And the last step then is to double check our brake fluid reservoir and top it off. Make sure we are at the full indicator mark. Cap that reservoir, and this service is complete.